can happen in a hospital? Basically anything. Can you close down a hospital?
You need to.
How do you do that? What happens if somebody needs a hospital?
You direct it to another hospital.
What if there's no other hospital available? You're the only hospital in a city or a small town. You're the only hospital in a small town. You can't really close. If you're in a large city, there's always another hospital. If you're a hospital in a small town and you're the only hospital in a small town, can you actually close?
No.
I mean, there's a difference between close and temporary lockdown.
So what would you consider a temporary lockdown?
Active shooter drill,
No, I'm talking about time-wise.
a temporary lockdown, probably a day at the most.
So what happens to all the people who need to get into the hospital during that day that you're locked down?
Depends on the
Playing
scale.
devil's advocate here, so, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, depends on the scale of emergency.
Yeah. So normally what happens when the hospital is locked down, it is locked down, but there's usually one entrance open, and it's usually the ER. And that's open because all the security goes to that particular entrance. So people can still get in, but they don't come in the main door, and they don't come in the back door, they don't come in through the parking lot. They come in through the ER. And normally, that's where you put the security if you have a lockdown. So you can't actually lock down the whole hospital. You could, but usually there's one door left. It's not actually left open, it's closed, but you're able to get in through that way. So, fire safety, electrical safety, life safety, environmental safety, and personal safety. So, the fire.
Right? So,
Pardon?
I mean, if there's an active shooter, you're not gonna wanna go in.
No, exactly. But the idea for active shooter is that you lock down to keep them in so that the security and cops and whoever else can find them.
Yeah.
So you're locked down to try and keep them contained. And you get everybody else out.
Yeah.
So you keep him contained, but get everybody else out. It's a different way of working. Okay, remember the acronym RACE. So RACE is rescue, activate, contain, and extinguish. So you rescue anyone in the immediate area, you activate the alarms, you contain the fire with either fire extinguisher if possible, if not, the fire doors, shut the fire doors. Shut every other door in the area. And try and extinguish it, but if you can't extinguish it, then you get out. And of course, that. Okay. So fire doors, firewalls, smoke walls help contain the smoke in the compartments. Fire doors automatically shut, and the corridor is designed to give a safe way to exit the building. Exit signs all have to be lit so that they know. They also have to be available and clear. Hospital code words should be used when reporting a fire. Some hospitals now have decided not to use code words, but say it in clear. So they will say, alert fire on such and such, or reported at such and such a site. instead of using code red. Fire drills are performed periodically. So occasionally we'll get a fire drill up here. Fire alarm pull stations. Everybody knows now where the fire alarm pull stations are. Around here. There's two, one on one side, one on the other. Fire doors will shut. Elevators will move to the ground floor and usually are disabled. And the fire extinguisher, really easy to use. Equipment and electrical safety. So if you're in an office, for example, in the hospital, and you bring in your own coffee maker, or your own, I'm not sure why anybody would want a hairdryer in there, but whatever. Small fridge, coffee maker, whatever it is. They all have to be reviewed by the electrical department, the electricians. If we bring in something, I have a coffee thing in my office, use it for tea, but it's still coffee thing. And I had to get it checked out by the electrical people so that they know they're not going to set on fire or something. In the event of a power outage, hospitals operating emergency generators if they're lucky. What about our departments, our radiation therapy departments? Could we work on generators? Why not?
Too strong.
Yeah, I mentioned that, didn't I? A while ago. Yes, okay. Yeah, there is no generator made that will run our machines. So they'll run some of the X-ray equipment, but not our machines. So until the power comes back on, we're helping out elsewhere. So the emergency receptacles. Has anybody noticed those? Who's worked in a hospital before? Or in a clinic somewhere? Okay. Have you seen anything that looks like an emergency receptacle? The emergency receptacles I'm talking about are the power plugs.
Oh,
If they work,
they're like red
yeah,
plated
Yeah.
outside, yeah.
yeah, they're basically red. And they are supposed to work in an emergency. And I say supposed to work in an emergency. So you can plug things in, obviously not your coffee pot or anything like that, but things that you want to use in an emergency. They're red. Same as the emergency lights that come on if there's a power failure. Hazmat. OSHA is issued hazmat communication standard. Hospitals are required to provide staff with information regarding hazardous chemicals. This is something I mentioned last week. The MSDS sheets. Everything that is anyway hazardous has to have one of these MSDS sheets. We used to have, when we were still using X-ray film, we had processors that actually developed films. We go in and we didn't do wet processing anymore, but we still did chemicals. And we had to have MSDS sheets for those. And at one point, early one morning, I guess, there was this was in Texas when I was working in El Paso. And we all came in one morning and there was a fire truck sitting in front of the department. We thought, this is weird. So we all trooped in to see these firefighters, and there had been a leak in the processor. So there was chemicals running all over the floor. And they're trying to find these MSDS sheets to find out what the chemicals were. So, yeah, so we eventually found them for them. But I'm not sure who called the fire department, but anyway. And the service safety procedures for handling radioactive materials. So who would be in charge, for example, of radioactive materials? Which department? Nuke Med, yeah, nuclear medicine. They would be in charge of a spill, if you like to call it that, or a problem with nuclear material or radioactive materials. If you're treating a patient who has a IV pump, does anybody know what I mean by an IV pump? It's it's a piece of machinery that sits on an IV pole, and the IV tubing goes through it, and you can set the amount of liquid that the patient gets. And if there's a problem with the pump, there's an alarm that goes off. And everybody looks at it and says, oh, there's an alarm. And they silence it because it's very annoying. It is, it's very annoying. Medical equipment, alarms are there for a reason. There's something wrong. They shouldn't be silenced. A funny story. One of my many funny stories. Trouble is, they're all true. I was treating several patients over Christmas one year in Canada. And my husband and I were going out for dinner with friends, but I had to go in and treat some patients beforehand. So we all got in, and the doctors were there, and the patients were there, and everything. And my husband sat in the waiting room. And this patient came down, and his IV pump was going, and the alarm was going off. And there was no nurses in. So the doctor looks at it and says, I don't know what's wrong. And the other one looks at it and said, I don't know what's wrong. And he looked at me, and I said, don't look at me, I don't know what's wrong either. And he said, well, you want to go upstairs and find a nurse? And I said, not particularly. He said, okay. Isn't Tom here? I said, yeah. Well, see if he can come over and look at it. And I said, he's a paramedic, he doesn't, okay. So I called him over, and he looks at it, and he says, yeah. And he said, one of the docs says, do you know what it is? He said, yeah. He said, can you fix it? No. Why not? Because I'm pre-hospital care, I'm not allowed to touch anything in a hospital. And he looked at him and said, for God's sake, fix it. Do you know how? Yeah. Do you know how to? Yeah, okay. It's your license then, okay? So he fixed it and everything was fine. And so we get on, and this is another thing about security. We had this patient in the room, and when you're working in the department, usually on your own on a weekend, you get this sixth sense that somebody's outside the door. So I looked around, and here's a security guy leaning around the corner looking at me. And I said, go out and see what it is. I'll find it. And I looked at him and I said, can I help you? Yeah, I need some ID. I said, I've got a patient in the room. Can you wait? Well, yes. So, and I've got 2 doctors in the room, plus my husband, plus the patient and her relative, and we're moving them across to the bed. So everybody troops out, and the security guy says, I need some ID. So I basically picked up my ID and I showed him it to him. Okay. And one of the docs digs in his pocket and hands him his ID. And our boss, who was the director of radiation therapy, didn't have his ID on. He left it in the car. And he looked at me and he says, "She'll vouch for me." And I looked at him and I said, "Well,"
You look kind of unfamiliar.
and I said, "Yeah, he's our boss. He's fine." And he looks at Tom, and of course Tom's in street clothes. And he digs out not only his province license, but his federal license, and says, "Here." Okay, thanks.
Did he just randomly need ID checks, or was there a reason he was checking everybody, or he does that all the time?
Well, it turned out that this was Christmas Day.
Oh.
He was working Christmas Day. He was, for want of a better word, pissed because he was working Christmas Day. So he wanted everybody else to be as miserable as he was. He got hauled over the coals for, not for checking IDs, because, that's his job, but for coming down and interrupting us when we were treating patients. So anyway, that's beside the point. So, personal safety, talking about security. Hospital security staff has a responsibility to protect staff, patients, visitors, and the property. It's important to report any suspicious activities or perceived threats. Perceived threats. It doesn't have to happen. If you're walking through the parking lot and you think there's somebody behind you, tell somebody. Always be aware of surroundings. If you're going to and from the hospital, if you're going, say, from the parking lot to the main building, walk together if possible. Keep valuables out of sight and limit the amount of cash you carry. Use of ID badges are essential. Name tags and school badges should be shown and worn at all times. Anyone not wearing a badge will be treated as a visitor. I had a friend who worked with me in Canada, and she had worked for a while in Birmingham, Alabama. And when she finished her shift for the day, the security guys would walk them from the main hospital to the parking lot and make sure everyone got in their cars. Because, let's put it this way, it wasn't the best part of town. So, yeah. So think safety first. So let's, on that subject, I've got a couple more videos for Alice. And these are actually quite good ones.
Do you want to know the shortcut?
Pardon?
Do you want to know the shortcut to?
No, thank you.
Okay, that's fine.
No, that's good, no problem.
It's too high tech.
Oh, come on, people.
It's control.
There we go.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Let's just get rid of that.
Are you a vegetarian?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No.
That's so bad.
Just wondering because I got a veggie thingy? No.
I feel you though. Subway's meat is iffy.
It was just removed today. No, it was removed last time too, I noticed.
Subway's meat is iffy.
I usually get bacon when I go down there, so.
I mean,
Right?
Right?
14 dead, 50 injured. A lot of those injuries are severe.
John 911, what's the location of the emergency?
Sandy Hook School. I think there's somebody shooting in here. Sandy Hook School.
22 people killed in two separate shootings on the campus this morning. More than 20 people are said to be injured. It is said by all involved to be the work of a lone gunman. No idea.
Hello, I'm Mike Vitale, Vice President for Academic Affairs and Student Services at Kansas City, Kansas Community College. During the Columbine shooting, students who were in the library were instructed to hide beneath desks, even though there was an additional door they could have exited through to avoid the shooters. This passive response strategy was also used during the Virginia Tech and Sandy Hook shootings. And tragically, we know the results of those decisions. 25 years of mass shooting events have yielded a national average of 5 to 6 minutes for the response time of law enforcement to an active shooter scene. 5 to 6 minutes can be the difference between life and death. In light of recent events, it is necessary to review how to react should you encounter an active shooter. ALICE, A-L-I-C-E, the acronym for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate, is based on the premise that information, authorization, and proactive training are the key to surviving the active shooter. Should you notice anyone suspicious, contact KCKCC Campus Police at 913-288-7636. Provide a description such as clothing, weight, height, or weapon, and the suspect's location. Another option to contact KCKCC Police is to use one of the campus outside emergency phones. This will connect you directly with the campus police dispatch. Once alert is received, a law enforcement team starts to respond and will direct officers to the scene and alerting the campus by text, email, and intercom. Getting correct information is crucial to your survival in a crisis situation.
Okay, it's a shooter on campus, we don't need to leave this stuff on.
This information will give you the knowledge to make the right decisions about your safety. If you receive an alert while in a classroom or office, and your only option is to stay at your location because the shooter is nearby, you should close and lock your doors immediately. If your doors do not lock, you should attempt to barricade the door using chairs or desks in the room. Another option is to wrap a belt or cord around the door handle to keep it shut if the door opens outward. Hitting a moving target possesses a challenge. If the shooter does enter the classroom, you want to make it difficult for the shooter to open fire on stationary targets. Spreading out, movement, and distractions are important if the shooter does enter the classroom. Your response to a shooter close by or in a room may include you evacuating as soon as possible. The best case scenario is for you to be able to exit the room as soon as possible to escape the shooter.
Hey, there's a shooter on campus, we have to leave, let's go, come on, hurry.
Take a moment to review your classroom and observe ways to exit the room in the event of an emergency. If there's only one door, observe windows. If the room is above ground, is there a ledge or location outside you can safely hide until help arrives? Disrupting the ability of the shooter to use his weapon is the main goal of this step. If the shooter enters the classroom and escape is not possible, everyone should start throwing objects such as books, backpacks, purses, laptops, chairs, all at the head of the shooter, then either head for the exit or subdue the shooter. If you control the head, you control the body, but you have to immobilize the shooter first by having one person attack each of the arms and legs, then force the shooter to the ground while another person grabs his head. If the weapon comes free, grab it and place it in a trash can away from the struggle. Call the police while keeping the shooter on the ground. Once law enforcement arrives, they'll be looking for someone with a weapon, and you do not want to be holding it upon their arrival. We believe students and staff may have a greater opportunity to avoid injury or death by following these steps. Knowing the philosophy of the ALICE program and using it when necessary may increase your chances of survival when confronted by an active shooter. Review this video often on the college website. Let's work to make Kansas City, Kansas Community College a safe and reliable place to work, study, and enjoy.
Okay, this one I believe is a business.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst.
That's not it.
If you are ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911.
Why is it always the stupid women that react?
I was just gonna say. Like, shut up.
If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide.
Put that printer in front of the door.
Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can.
There you go.
Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
Questions on any of these? Does it make sense? Yeah? Okay. So what was he doing with the fire extinguisher? He's gonna use it as a club, basically. What else can he use it as?
Just be as bright.
Yeah. CO2 is gonna cut anybody down, especially if they're not expecting it. Okay, so let me find the fire thing that I was gonna talk to. So this one was a fire which happened in Hartford, Connecticut in the 60s, I believe. But it actually changed how people, how hospitals were redesigned.
That face that is usually covered by her phone has finally made an appearance.
Blackest smoke I've ever seen. The floor to ceiling, all the wall, just rolling at me.
I still see that nurse screaming out of that treatment window.
A couple of my friends from nursing school ran up to me and said, Eileen, you're alive.
In the next half hour, you will meet the men and women who survived the Hartford Hospital fire of 1961. You will hear about the lives they saved, the people they lost, and how this disaster prompted changes nationwide. This is a topic most have not touched for 50 years.
It was something that we didn't talk about, and I haven't talked about it for many years.
Across the country, 37 million Americans will be admitted into a hospital this year. Most of those patients take for granted that their hospital rooms are safe and the staff ready in case of an emergency. They take for granted that the hospital follows national fire codes. But most of those patients have no idea that those fire codes are in place because of what happened at Hartford Hospital 50 years ago.
It was a different world entirely.
Decades ago, things looked a little different. There were typically 4 patients to a room. Nurses wore white, and smoking was commonplace.
There was not any place really in the hospital where a person couldn't smoke.
Smoldering cigarette ash would ignite, causing the nation's worst hospital fire to date.
This is Dick Bertel at the scene of a multi-alarm fire at the Hartford Hospital. In front of me, as I face the front of Hartford Hospital, is a maze of fire trucks, fire hose, and firefighting equipment of all description. This is a fire confined to the 9th, 10th, and 11th floor.
December 8, 1961, 2:38 in the afternoon. A nurse on the 12th floor of Hartford Hospital would see smoke and pull a fire alarm. 3 floors below, on the 9th floor, trouble was brewing. The trash chute door was weak, and in the basement of that chute, smoldering cigarette ashes were about to ignite.
I was at the time acting head nurse on the unit.
On December 8th of 1961, I was an intern on the pediatric floor.
I was a brand new nurse out on 9A. It was my first floor.
My name is Bob Maher. On December 8th of 1961, I was a male aide here at Hartford Hospital.
I'm speaking from the 9th floor. I've worked my way up now to the disaster spot itself, and we have a figure of 9 persons dead here on the 9th floor of Hartford Hospital. The scene is one of water-filled halls, soaked walls, debris. There are firemen, there are priests, there are nurses, there are doctors.
By 2:40 that afternoon, an explosion forced the trash chute door from its hinges. It became a fiery missile igniting the floor. For 45 minutes, fire would rage. The devastation was total. In all, 16 people were killed. Patients, visitors, nurses, and 1 physician who walked into those flames to help his patients. Their legacy is in every brick, in every hospital across the country. The Hartford Hospital fire of 1961 changed hospital construction forever.
It was a normal day. It was just a routine day. I was working the day shift, and I went to work. And at some point that morning, I received a call to go to the 9th floor to assist with taking a patient out of bed. I went up on the elevator, got off on the 9th floor. I turned to my left to go to Center 9, and it was then that I saw the blackest cloud of smoke rolling towards me. It just filled the entire corridor, and it was rolling towards me rapidly. I turned and I ran to the north end of the building, or North 9, with this black cloud following me down the hall.
And I was standing right on the elbow of the desk, charting my medications, when it was a male aide running down the hall saying fire, and black smoke was following him.
I grabbed the fire door and unlatched it from the wall and stopped and looked back. A couple of nurses approached me at the same time, and when I looked back, I saw this black cloud now right on top of us.
And so he raced, and I raced up, and we shut the fire doors.
And I pushed the fire door closed.
In a short time after that, we realized how alarming it really was.
And we stood there for a moment, not knowing what was going on.
On the other side of the smoke door, fire raged, fueled by the materials that lined the ceiling and the walls. Flame retardant wasn't a priority. Wallpaper became kindling. The ceiling tiles were made of sugarcane grass, and when they fell, they created a virtual bonfire.
Slowly, we saw the fire door start to disappear. Smoke was coming around the fire door on both sides, and it didn't take long, and the fire door disappeared. It couldn't have been more than a few minutes later that I heard someone on the other side of the door, banging on the door. It was a woman. She was screaming for help. Without even giving it a thought, I went back into the smoke. I felt along the door, and I found the door handle of the fire door. And of course, today I think about it, and I realize how stupid it was. I opened the door to go out to help, and I could feel the pressure of the door pushing on me. But I hollered for the woman to come inside. She was screaming, and she said, "I can't. I don't know where to go. I can't see." And I said, "Just come to my voice." And she didn't move. She was very close. And I opened the door some more, and I started to go around the corner to go out and get her, when I felt the heat of the flame, and it took the hair on the side of my head off, and this eyebrow and the eyelash, just a flash. And I pulled my head back and realized there was no way I was getting out there, and I didn't think I was going to get that door closed again. But I just pushed, and I pushed, I guess, with everything I had, and I got the door locked again.
And Dr. Pertek was there, the famous surgeon, Dr. Pertek. He was one of our most respected surgeons, and he happened to be on the floor. And he and I looked at each other because he said, we heard screaming on the other side of our door, our fire door. And he said, "Miss Gormley," he said, "we have to open the doors." And so we did open them a crack, and down on the floor was the charred, unbelievably charred remains of a person who was still alive and moaning. So he and I pulled this woman into what would have been the linen closet. And I said, "Dr. Pertek, what can I do for you?" So he said, "Miss Gormley," he said, "just get me some morphine." And I did. We got some morphine, and he administered some morphine to this person. And we just kind of covered her and made her comfortable. Now, to this day, I'm guessing that that was a woman, but I'm not sure if that was one of the women patients.
Whenever I think about the fire, and it's been 50 years now, that's the first thought that I have. It's as clear as if it was yesterday.
People are being taken out. It appears now that perhaps all of the patients have been, I can see another one now, moving down the hall, attended by at least 6 or 7 people coming over toward the elevator. They're working their way down the hall. It was believed at first that this fire had escaped a tragic note, but it now is a definite figure confirmed by state police. We have 9 persons dead here on the 9th floor, where the major trouble came.
See the devastation here after the fire, and to see things that you never would imagine seeing. You know, tiles melting like icicles off the ceilings.
I remember the desk area. I remember everything being black, burnt, black, sooty. And I remember the telephone being just a glob of black plastic sitting on the counter of the nurse's station.
There were no fire drills, no planned escapes. Everyone had to pitch in pitch black. Patients on the floor who could be discharged were. Those who could not had to be moved.
The hall was absolutely soot black.
It's hard to describe. Everything was black and gray. And if you could picture yourself with your color on, being in a black and white movie, that's exactly what it was, but it wasn't pleasant.
You could not see your hand in front of your face. So we formed a human chain and went down, and I knew the floor very well, as did the nurses that were working there. We went down through the black hall, and then we would enter a room. So we put wet towels over their heads and over our heads as we would bring them back through the hall. Now, as the emergency escalated, what was happening, we had to get everyone off the 9th floor and down onto the other floors. I can't tell you how many times I ran from the 9th floor to the lobby, to the 9th floor to the lobby, to the 9th floor to the lobby, because of course the elevators weren't working.
Outside, firefighters arrived in minutes, but there was a problem.
The firemen came and the ladders did not reach the 9th floor.
I still see that nurse screaming out of that treatment window, 1 floor above where the ladder was.
And they extended the ladder as high as it could go, almost vertical. And he was still a few feet short. And I understand he got to the tip of the ladder, the window was broken out. Now you're 100 feet in the air.
Frank Droney was one of the first firefighters on the scene.
This friend of mine took to jail. He actually jumped from the top of the ladder to the window. And they put his buddy in. They secured all the doors in there, made sure the people in the room stayed in the room, told them what to do. Wet towels, put them around the bottom of the door. But if it wasn't for the Dick, there would be a lot more people.
An absolutely heroic event, heroic movement.
People are just soaking wet, dirt and debris scattered throughout the halls. We had to work our way up a back stairway where firemen are rushing, cascading water down the stairways.
It defied instinct. Most people wanted to run, but opening doors and running away meant certain death. Those who survived stayed safe behind closed doors.
The doors in those days were swinging doors, which were not totally occlusive, so you had spaces beneath the doors. And I remember my nurses telling me later how they stripped the linen off the beds in those rooms, wet the linen down at the sinks, and piled the linen across the spaces along the doors.
A shut door means survival, plain and simple. The door's shut, you're going to survive. We learned a lot from this fire.
Mike Gary is the fire chief in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, and also fire marshal at Hartford Hospital. He comes from a long line of firefighters.
My grandfather was there. There's a picture of him in the hospital archives evacuating patients. He died when I was very young. I don't remember him telling us a whole lot about it, but I remember my grandmother telling me that this is one of the fires he came back from where he cried. And I remember that vividly.
50 years later, doors in hospitals now shut with what is called a positive latch, meaning it won't open unless someone deliberately opens it. Not the case in 1961. Rolling latches made it easier to enter a room.
The doors would open in. And all you had to do to get through that door was push on that door. Whether you pushed on it with a stretcher, pushed on it with your hand, or a cart, it didn't take much more than 5 or 7 pounds of pressure to overcome the roller latch and allow entry into the room. Now, if you think about it, with an inward opening door, pressure from a fire on the outside of that door, and only needing to increase 5, 7 pounds, whatever it was, it's not a big increment. And those doors were forced open, and that meant fire and smoke travel.
Dr. David Crombie was on the pediatric floor that day, an intern at the hospital.
I remember that voice coming on the public address system. This is Dr. Wells Standish, president of the medical staff. We have suffered a tremendous tragedy this afternoon with a fire on the 9th floor. There has been loss of life.
His parents had heard a young physician had been killed.
So I remember calling home, and my mother picked up the phone, and I identified myself. There was a long pause. And then she realized that her son had not died in the fire. And she scolded me that I hadn't called earlier, but the events of the day were absorbing.
It was his colleague, resident Norm Hedenstadt, who would not survive.
And it was a holy day of obligation. So he said to me, Eileen, are you going to Mass? We would go to St. Peter's. And I said, yes, I just want to get my medications charted, and as soon as, I give over the shift, I'll go to Mass too. So he then had left our floor in the minutes when the explosion from the trash chute. He had gone down in the elevator.
Hedenstedt was in the coffee shop when the fire broke out, and the coffee shop was in the place in JB1 where our mailroom is now. And for some reason, it was either he looked out the window and saw smoke on 9, or someone came into the coffee shop and said they're having a problem on 9. I don't know. But he exited the coffee shop and went to the elevators.
And he immediately came back up to help.
And he went up on the elevator to 9, thinking my patients are there. There must be, if there's any tragedy there, I've got to look after it. And so I talked with nurses who got on the elevator in the lobby at the same time that he did. And when the elevator door opened on 9, they, meaning my nurse friends of that era, they were frantically pushing the buttons because there was evidence of smoke and fire out there on the 9th floor. And so they were frantically trying to get the elevator to go up to 10. And it did go up to 10. And when the door opened on 10 and they all got out, he wasn't there. So he got out on the 9th floor to somehow help his patients and see if he could deliver on his obligations. And he perished on the 9th floor.
They couldn't identify him but for his teeth and his ring.
There was an explosion in the trash chute. 9 dead. It appears to be at least 12 dead now here in the Hartford Hospital fire. Dick O'Brien on the 9th floor at Hartford Hospital.
The investigation would eventually narrow in on the trash chutes and the confusion around them. Dry trash only, burnable waste, they read. Many thought that meant the chutes led directly to the incinerator in the basement. It wasn't uncommon for cigarettes or ash to get thrown down the chute. But the chutes led to a holding pile in the basement, not the incinerator. Chutes were never used in the hospital again. Many other hospitals followed suit.
There really were no laws pertaining to fire safety. There were standards, and a lot of these standards were voluntary. Now we've got a state fire code that requires words are in there are shall. You shall build a building with a sprinkler system.
Some changes were immediate, banning chutes, limiting smoking. Other changes came later.
We learned that we need sprinkler systems in patient buildings. It's difficult to evacuate a patient. We need to defend in place. And the best way to defend in place is with a total fire protection package, a sprinkler system. You're putting 60 gallons of water per minute in all the locations of the floor. So each sprinkler head's worth 60 gallons per minute. They're on the average about 15, 18 feet apart. We also learned that the one-piece fire door, the 8-foot fire door, was not practical. Didn't allow exit. It created a smoke compartment, but it created no way out.
Fire drills are now part of the culture, and fire escapes. 2 exits are now mandatory so people can get out. Wallpaper, ceiling tiles must be flame retardant.
We limit the combustibles. We put water on every floor. We close and latch patient doors. We create fire barriers. Dead-end corridors greater than 30 feet are no longer allowed.
Most of the changes were spearheaded by the physician who was also the hospital's chief executive officer, T. Stuart Hamilton. Decades before transparency was common practice, Hamilton believed in it. He went public with the disaster, inviting staff experts, even lawmakers, to see the devastation, to document it, all to make sure it would never happen again.
Within 24 hours of the event, T. Stuart Hamilton had every staff member in the hospital walk through that floor. It was still smoldering, in essence. The stench of the fire was still present. The blackened walls, the dripping water from the ceilings, the wires hanging down. And I asked the staff members what the expectation that Dr. Hamilton had for walking them through the floor was, and they all said, in different ways, He wanted us to see this tragedy, to understand it, and to recognize that this should never happen again. What T. Stuart Hamilton did that day, it was profound. Imagine how conflicted he must have been as a leader, to have this tragedy, this loss of life, this really unprecedented fire occur within the hospital, but at the same point in time, to recognize that the greater good that can come from that event was to bring attention, to assess the situation fully, and to create reforms that not only would benefit our hospital in Hartford, but in fact all hospitals across the country.
Those who survived will never forget that winter day. It's become part of who they are.
I think it changed me in many ways.
Keep wondering, could I have saved it? Yeah. You think about it for a while.
If it had a positive effect at all, it would be the changes that Harvard Hospital has made.
And the legacy of the 16 lives lost lives on in every fire escape, every sprinkler, every latch and fire retardant fiber in hospitals here and across the country.
It could be said that it could have been brought down by its own fire, but instead that fire was turned into a benefit for hospital construction nationwide.
There's not an awful lot to be said after that, is there? So, as they said in the video, that most of the safety stuff or the fire safety stuff that now are in hospitals nationwide, a lot of it comes from that fire. It's difficult to watch. Did you find it even more difficult to watch than the Australian one, which was basically scripted? Did you find it more difficult to watch that than the Australian one?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is difficult to watch, but it's something that you have to see in order to realize what hospitals are like in the early 60s. And the fact that these rolling doors of the hospital rooms, I can remember them when I first started. So they didn't get fixed till the early 70s, but and the one part fire doors. Nowadays you have those two fire, that's what's out there in the hallways. Have you noticed the two doors that are always open halfway down the hallway? Those are fire doors. If there's something goes wrong with if there's a fire alert or something happens with the fire system, both these doors will close. They're magnetically opened at the moment. But as soon as the fire system senses something wrong, those fire doors will close. And you can open them, but they won't stay open until security and the fire department have cleared it and they're remagnetized. So that's the kind of system that are in all of the hospitals. The other thing, of course, is the exits. Everybody knows about, you have to go to the exit, and there has to be 2 exits in each area. And they have to be signed. You have to have exit on it. This hospital didn't have anything like that. So how would you get somebody out of, if you were in a hospital, for example, and you were on a floor and the fire was above you, and you were told to evacuate the floor. How do you do that? You do not use, remember, you're not allowed to use the elevators. You're maybe 4 floors up. You've got patients who are bedridden. You've got patients who you can move in a wheelchair. You have some patients that are mobile, they can walk. So what do? So the patients that are mobile, that can walk, you can get one person to walk them down the stairs, right? How do you go about getting somebody who is bedridden? Carry them? Okay. How many people does it take to carry them though? 3 or 4 maybe? Can you afford to have 3 or 4 people doing each person? No, you don't have enough staff. So what you do is you get them, and this sounds weird, but you put a blanket on the floor and you put the person on the blanket and you pull.
Downstairs.
At least till the end of the hallway, and then you get one person on one end of the blanket, one person on the other end of the blanket, and get them downstairs. Same with somebody who's in a wheelchair. They have chairs that the fire department have that actually are used to go downstairs. You can do that, but I remember seeing a video, I wish I could remember where I saw it, that they were showing an evacuation of a NICU. And they had all these babies on on a blanket on the floor, and they were on their hands and knees and pulling this blanket of all these babies on the floor.
It was one blanket with a bunch of babies?
One blanket, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And there was about eight babies, and they were basically crawling because of the smoke. They were crawling under the smoke, all these babies on the blanket. I wish I could remember where I saw that, because it sounds funny, but it was an excellent way to move them. And it could be because of the fire doors. You may only need to get from one end of the floor to the other end of the floor where you've got a fire door. So you may not need to put somebody down the stairs. All you need to do is move them from one end of the hallway to the other end of the hallway. So basically you pull them any way you can. You get them out of bed, you put them on a blanket and you pull. or you put them in a wheelchair and put your oxygen on their lap and off you go. So there's ways of getting people out of the way. Let me see what's here. Oh, I just shut my thing off here.
They have a baby evacuation chair system.
What?
They have a baby evacuation chair system. It's like a little cart and you can stick the babies in the pockets.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like fire drills on here.
Yeah.
But I don't know if what you watched was a fire drill.
There's one that I've seen that one. There was another one that I wanted to show you guys, and I can't remember what it was. This one was good. No. This, oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, that, you don't want to see that one. That's not, okay. That's too late. That's not to anybody. Oh, yeah, okay. So this is something that may not ever come to pass, but this is actually a worst case scenario. You're facing the evacuation of a whole hospital. So this is at Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital. So here's your alert. So level 1, alert for potential evacuation. Level 2, limited area, horizontal. So that would be moving patients from one end of the hallway to the other end of the hallway. Limited area, vertical. So that would be maybe moving people from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor, or the 4th floor to the 5th floor, whichever happens to be. Large area building, so that would be level 4A. Large area building, so that would be, if we considered the campus as a hospital building. So it would be like evacuating A building and moving everybody over to B building or C building. And then level 4B, entire single campus. So it would mean the hospital, everybody out and go over to another hospital or over to another building. And then here's the big one, entire area. So it would be like moving the patients in all of the buildings on this campus. Imagine them full of patients and having to move them to another facility. Move them to downtown campus, for example. And that would be, I mean, even if we had to evacuate this whole campus, most people are mobile. Think about it, 2/3 of the people are in beds. So, types of evacuation. So we have emergency evacuation, fire or an explosion, immediate departure due to life or safety threat. Urgent evacuation, flood or utility failure, commence within 4 hours. And then planned evacuation, at least 48 hours to prepare. So let's see if we can figure out this. So emergency evacuation, there's an explosion somewhere in the building. You don't know where it's going, you don't know what happened, you don't know whether there's going to be other explosions, so you have to get everybody out now. Urgent evacuation, Flood and utility failure, okay. Commence within 4 hours, so you've got no power. If you've got a flood, you've got no water. You have to make sure that everybody's out within 4 hours. And then planned evacuation, at least 48 hours to prepare. They had this during Katrina in New Orleans. One of the hospitals had 48 hours to prepare. They were given 48 hours notice, and they evacuated almost all of the patients out of the city. But there were other hospitals that didn't do that. So the patients were left in the hospital. The hospital that was in, everybody remember Katrina? Yeah. There was a hospital called the Charity Hospital at that point. And it is about, about 13 or 14 floors. Big, huge hospital. And it is now an empty shell. And what happened there was that they had no utilities, no food, no water, nothing. And they had just had to leave the patients. They couldn't cope. Whereas some of the other hospitals in New Orleans got everybody out. They had asked Charity if they could help, and they said no. So that's what happened. So the fact that you have 48 hours to prepare, as opposed to 4 hours, as opposed to you're out now or sooner, makes it very difficult to figure out what's happening. This is all things that you probably need when you have time to prepare. So you've got vests for people who are in trying to organize this stuff. You've got clipboards and checklists. You've got triage tape. You've got what they call go pouches, resealable medication bags, chemical nightsticks. Why that? Chemical nightsticks.
So you can see.
Yeah. Pens and markers, patient forms, stuff like that. Hospital horizontal movement. So from unit to patient holding area, you're horizontal, you're going from one area. Say you've got, as they said you've got an east wing and a west wing, both on the same floor. So if you have to move from east to west, all you do is trundle all your patients over to the other side. And that's a little easier because you're not lifting too many patients, you're just moving them, you're just rolling them. Then it comes to vertical movement. You're going from the 9th floor to the 8th floor, or the 8th floor to the 9th floor, or the 8th floor to 6th floor, or whatever it happens to be. And then you've got patient loading. How many ambulances do you need? How many buses do you need? Every single bus in the whole city, yeah? Every single ambulance in the whole city. Moving to onward destination. But there's a problem. What's my problem here? You've got, what's a normal sized hospital? How many patients? 300, 400 patients. Where do you put them?
In the halls.
No, I'm talking about taking them out of this is an evacuation of the whole building. an evacuation of the whole hospital. You have to have somewhere to put them. So you have to rely on your competitors to take your patients. So, for example, if UF or UF Health has to evacuate, where do the patients go? The Mayo? Baptist? Memorial? St. Vincent's? All of the above?
Yeah, sometimes multiple places.
Yeah.
Do they have a, some kind of plan in place among
Yeah.
hospitals of the city?
Yeah, there's a disaster plan out there, and every hospital has a disaster plan. And what happens is that each patient will have a little go pouch with all of their medical history, all of their medications, all that lovely stuff that they need to have.
That's if you have planning.
Pardon?
That's if you have planning.
Yeah.
time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But it still causes chaos if you have to evacuate in the middle of the night. Or for some reason, you have to evacuate and it's the middle of rush hour. Can you imagine? Trying to evacuate UF Health in the middle of rush hour? Where's your exit? 95? Yeah, okay.
Start sticking patients in people's cars.
Why don't we allow that though?
Well, for obvious safety reasons.
Yeah, yeah. Not only safety reasons, but insurance reasons. So you move them by ambulance, you move them by bus, but not private cars because of the insurance problems. So the vertical movement goes down to the loading area, which can be the emergency department or the main lobby of the hospital, wherever. Okay, mobility, here's going downstairs. Now, here's the babies, NICU, being evacuated. But this lady's going downstairs, the firefighter here. There's supposed to be somebody on the other end.
Let's say that's a bumpy ride.
Yeah. And this lady. Hopefully she's not going downstairs. That would be a little difficult. So you have ambulatory, wheelchair, non-ambulatory. So you have lowest acuity, moderate acuity. So what's lowest acuity mean? What's lowest acuity mean? Patients who are stable. They're not critical, they're not serious. Moderate acuity is people who are what they call serious but stable. Critical care. Interrupted procedure, an arm carry. So critical care ones, you have to be careful. An arm carry, so you can manage to carry these patients. And behavioral health. What does behavioral health stand for? What does it mean? Pardon? Psych. Okay, psych patients. Yeah, psych patients. That gives you an added problem, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So patient moving sequence by mobility area. Focus on efficiency. First, move the ambulatory. So, ambulatory, elderly, and behavioral health may be moved faster as wheelchair patients. Rather than having to get Mr. Jones, who's 102, he's doddering around with his stick, you put him in a wheelchair and off you go. Same as the behavioral health patients, the psych patients. Discharge eligible patients, so patients that are ready to go home. Get them out of there. Get them home. Wheelchair patients, and then non-ambulatory patients.
What does that mean for lowest to highest acuity?
Lowest acuity would be people who would be serious but stable.
Oh, so
Highest
they
acuity
move them
will
out
be
first?
critical. What?
So when they say move them out first?
No, move them last. Get everybody who's mobile out first,
Right, okay.
out the way.
Yeah, that's
And then you've got non-ambulatory patients that you get last because you want everybody else out the way. So you can get as many people as possible to help with the bed patients. Okay. So, med sled. This is what it looks like. So, stairwell braking system for safe mobilization of lightweight or heavier patients by any staff member. So you get them on there and you can slide them along the floor or even downstairs, as long as you've got one person on one end and one person on the other. Allows for staff to be utilized in evacuation. Regular sled holds 800 pounds. Bariatric sled holds 800 pounds. Oh, I see, it's the size. So 36 by 87 and 48 by 87. So helps protect person while transporting, holds IV bags and oxygen and other small devices, stored on each floor and in distribution. So there you go. This is what it looks like. So you get them into the sled, you roll them, put the sled underneath, roll them back, and that's how it works.
So how many of those would be stored on each floor?
It depends. I mean, you could have 2 or 3.
Oh, so not a lot if you need, I mean.
Not a lot. You wouldn't expect to have to do this a lot. So, you plan for a disaster, but as far as these concerned, if you have 80 patients on a floor, you can't possibly have 80 of these. So maybe you have 10 patients who are bedbound. You may have 5 or 6 of those. So you take one downstairs, you bring the sled back up, and you put another one in. So special situations. So mothers and babies together. Always keep the mothers and babies together, otherwise you end up having problems. Specialty care patients, so that would be patients that need extra care. Airborne infectious isolation patients. It doesn't matter, even if you have a COVID ward, a COVID floor, you still need to evacuate these patients. Morbidly obese patients, that's where the bariatric slide comes in, or what we used to call the big mama wheelchairs. They were twice as big as the normal wheelchairs. Patients on ventilators. Orthopedic with equipment, so you have a patient who's got a bunch of interaction with his leg up in the air. You have to move him. And last but not least, OR patients. These would probably be left to last. The patients undergoing treatment procedures. So those we'll say are OR patients. Staff assignments. Nobody goes home. No staff goes home. On-duty personnel remain released and manpower is allocated by the command center. So you have every staff member that is in the building, and you put a call in for everybody else to come in. There's what is called a phone tree, where you start at the top and the CEO calls the COO, and the COO calls the directors, and the directors call the managers, and then the managers call their staff. Floods. I'm not sure where that is. My first guess when I looked at it, I thought New Orleans, but I don't think so. So there's your management. So you have incident command at the top, operations section chief, and then it goes down to medical care, security, evacuation, inpatients, patient tracking, access control, crowd control, traffic control, law enforcement interface, horizontal movement, patient holding, vertical movement, patient loading, and tracking and accountability. So a lot of this stuff you don't realize. For example, crowd control. You've got all these people coming down to, say, the main lobby, waiting till you get evacuated. You need somebody to keep everybody in place. Traffic control. You've got all these buses, all these ambulances coming in and out and in and out. You need somebody to control the traffic. And then you've got law enforcement interface. You have somebody that needs to be doing traffic control outside and keeping the people who want to come into the hospital but aren't allowed to in control. So this is, oh, nice. Hospital's collapsed. Very nice. Okay. So what do you need? You need to move your patients, but you need to move the staff and the supplies with them. So you need oxygen, you need biomedical stuff, you need linen, you need portable lights, you need supplies, you need patient comfort and privacy items, and you need staff. You need staff to move with them. So there's you see this one girl is moving the patient on her own. However, if she's going downstairs, she needs someone at the head. So do you put the patient down head first or feet first? Feet first, yeah. If you're moving a patient on a stretcher or a gurney, you always move them so that they're looking where they're going, not the other way around, because it's not funny to do it yourself. Yeah, okay. So any questions on that? Let's take a break for a little bit and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Okay, so that's 2:30, back in, well, make it 20. Back at 10 to 3. We'll see if I can find some more interesting stuff.
saw you earlier.
So I had to do like 2 videos for the last class, because I started doing other things and it stopped the video.
New York hospital whose power failed in the middle of the night. And they had to get everybody out. Shut that door, please, and thank you. I think we're gonna have to decide that the last one out, or last one in closes the door.
I'm closing it, I just forget, so you just
That's
remind me
okay.
and I'll be glad to get it.
I always try to remember, but sometimes I forget.
So this one is New York Langone, I believe, Medical Center.
Hospital. The backup generators there also failed. Tiny babies rushed out, oxygen pumped by hand, and our David Muir was there overnight into the early morning hours. David.
We're still here tonight, Diane. NYU Medical Center is the hospital in question.
there a
and I
video?
want to show you right here behind
Is there a
you.
video?
After
Are we supposed to have
these
pictures?
generators
Sorry about that.
failed
Hang
no
on.
less than 24 hours ago, it was at that moment the respirators went.
Okay, let's get it back down there.
I mean, I think we can kind of figure out what they're talking about.
Sorry about that. Oh, come on, people.
I like the visual. I don't like the-
Me too. Freaking out. What's going on?
Okay, we'll just have to wait for a couple of minutes till this decides to. So basically what happened was the NYU Medical Center, power failed. And their standby generators came on and then failed. So they've got a huge hospital and no power. There we go.
Hospital. The backup generators there also failed. Tiny babies rushed out, oxygen pumped by hand. And our David Muir was there overnight into the early morning hours. David.
We're still here tonight, Diane. NYU Medical Center is the hospital in question, and I wanted to show you right here behind me. If you look up at the hospital, you can see it's still pitch black after those generators failed a little less than 24 hours ago. It was at that moment the respirators went down, the elevators jammed, and as you mentioned, Diane, when it came to the newborns, they turned to CPR bags to actually pump the air in themselves, those tiny little lungs, to keep the babies alive. When we arrived, all you could see was the outline of the hospital against a darkened sky. A lone flashlight in one of the hospital rooms there, as doctors and nurses rushed from patient to patient. Out front, ambulances, these images from my iPhone as we approached the hospital. Just one of the nearly 300 patients, one by one, brought out and taken to safety. From the sky, the ambulances lined up around the block from all over the city. And we're learning more tonight about the moment the lights went out, the moment those critical machines, the respirators, stopped. This young doctor, right there.
Making sure that the patient had ventilators were safe.
The babies.
Babies, yeah.
Their first concern, the babies in intensive care, 20 of them. This nurse, clutching a newborn wrapped in a blanket, holding one of those plastic bags, doing the work of the respirator herself. In fact, all of the nurses in that unit were doing what's called bagging the air, literally squeezing bags of air into those tiny little lungs, cradling the babies and carrying them 9 floors down. Another baby rushed out, dwarfed by the size of the gurney. Once outside, the bag replaced with oxygen brought in by the paramedics. An entire team surrounding one baby. In fact, the hospital source telling me tonight that's what they did the moment the power was cut off, dividing up into teams, surrounding one patient at a time, carefully bringing them down a darkened stairwell, carrying them on plastic sleds rushed in by the paramedics, flashlights, all they had to see their way.
So there's literally like a bunch of people who just go with each patient, carry them down the stairs physically.
They were pulled out on that sled, sliding along the hospital floor. One by one, we watched, still evacuating long after the sun came up. It's now 10 a.m. in the morning, and you can see there's still a line of ambulances all the way up the street here. This operation's been going on for 12 hours now. You can see them lining up still at the front entrance of the hospital here as they carefully bring the patients down. And late today, 15 hours after those evacuations began, they were done. And the president had learned of those heroic nurses and those newborns.
During the darkness of the storm, I think we also saw what's brightest in America. Nurses at NYU Hospital carrying fragile newborns to safety.
We know that more than a half dozen area hospitals took all of the patients from this one hospital alone, Diane. And one more extraordinary note tonight, we learned that at least 4 of the women who left this hospital were in labor, and at last check, 2 of them have given birth. Remarkable that at this hour it appears that everyone taken from this hospital, Diane, is okay tonight.
If you're trying to lose belly fat, stop doing
okay.
cardio. This sounds bad.
I don't think so, thank you. So, that's one of them. The next one isn't, let me get back to where we were again. So this one's it's a fire evacuation, but it really isn't, it's a drill. Oh. Go back to here, and we will go up here and do this one, and let's see, hopefully this will work.
Dramatic rescue took place at a
Okay.
hospital. The backup generators there also failed. Tiny babies rushed out, oxygen pumped by hand, and our David Muir was there overnight into the early morning hours.
There we go, okay. So let's do this.
Okay, so.
Try
go
undoing it.
I'm
Return,
going-
yeah, because you pasted.
Well, that's the one I want now. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go back to here. Good, okay. So this is a drill, but it actually shows what we're looking at.
Yeah, we'll be taking it down to the next week, just X-ray.
Dr. Campion, floor 5219.
John, I'm not real happy where his pro time is. Why don't you give his doctor a call and change that code in there, okay?
Okay, I'll do that.
All right, I gotta go down and see Mr. Wilder.
Oh, okay.
Hi, how are you? Dr. Garrity, OR staff. Dr. Garrity, OR staff.
Code red, 843, code red, 843.
Code red.
843.
We have a code red on center 8. Center 8.
Don't worry, it'll be fine.
But I can't walk. What's the smoke?
I'm gonna help you, you don't need to be concerned. Don't worry, Helene, you're gonna be okay.
Code red, sector 8.
Don't worry, I'm gonna take you to an area of safety. We're gonna get you out.
Let me help you out.
Okay, I'm gonna pull you out of the room, we'll bring you down to a safe spot. You'll be okay.
Don't worry, Craig, I'll have you out of this smoke in a minute.
Don't worry, Mr. Wilder, it's gonna be okay.
Everything will be okay, just hang in
Out of
there.
the way, the fire department's on the way.
Hi, security, what type of alarm do we have? We have a full station on center 8 with a phone call of an active fire. Full station on center 8, phone call, active fire.
It's okay, Mr. Sullivan, we can get you out of here, the fire department's on its way.
Major fires in healthcare facilities are rare, but when they occur, they may have greater potential for loss of life than fires in other types of facilities.
Ma'am, I'm gonna have you take your patient down to the Bryant unit.
The reasons for this are clear. Most patients simply can't evacuate on their own because of their medical condition or age. Others may be confused by the alarm sound or frightened by the smell of smoke, or they may not know the best way out.
Being in a hospital, it's extremely important that all members of the staff are very, very comfortable with the evacuation policy of the hospital, but also the floor as well.
We are here to protect and save people's lives. If we don't practice good fire safety habits, we can risk putting our patients into danger.
To protect patients, staff members need to understand fire response procedures, including how to sound the alarm and get help, how to prevent fire and smoke from spreading, and how to conduct an evacuation.
Evacuation plans are critical. All staff members need to know the evacuation plans and need to know what to do and how to perform during an emergency. And this helps them provide maximum patient safety.
Healthcare facilities have written fire procedures describing what needs to be done by the staff in every part of the facility. Understanding the plan for your facility and practicing evacuation procedures are essential steps to preventing loss of life during a fire. But conditions can change. Staff members still must use their own best judgment, always remembering that the #1 priority is patient safety.
The first thing is to make sure the patient's okay, that their oxygen supply is okay, that their drips are running okay, because you really want to be sure that you're not abandoning the patient, and you want to be sure that help is identified and it's coming as rapidly as possible.
It's very important that staff knows what to do. They don't have to run to a manual. They know right off the bat this is what they can do and they can act quickly.
Remember, it's your responsibility. No matter what your job is, you are responsible for knowing and carrying out your part of the plan.
That's it, take your
Is there a fire? Well, you know what, we're not sure yet.
Nurses, doctors, orderlies, maintenance staff, kitchen workers, volunteers. Everyone needs to know how the plan works and what their role is.
And I want the rehearsal to begin now.
Conrad! For people to act effectively under the stress of a fire emergency, response procedures need to be practiced regularly. Only through regular drills can each staff member learn what his or her role is and how to perform it.
Drills are very important. We try to make them as close as possible to the real fire situation. It helps the staff to know what to expect.
Drills tell you what the problem is, what you're supposed to do about it, where you're supposed to go, and when you're supposed to go. It's just very important to practice, practice, practice.
The end result of all the training and procedures is that there's a benefit to everybody who's in the hospital, that in the case of emergency, we will get staff, families, visitors, everybody in the hospital out in a very quick and very safe way.
If a fire breaks out in a patient care area, there are specific steps to take.
Code red, 843, code red, 843.
Call out the facility's code word to alert other staff members. Activate the fire alarm. Evacuate anyone in immediate danger. Attempt to control or extinguish the fire if it can be done safely. Close doors to contain the smoke and fire. Once a fire has been contained to the room of origin behind a closed door, never reopen the door or attempt to re-enter the room to extinguish the fire. Then, evacuate the smoke compartment as directed by the person in charge. Healthcare facilities are divided into smoke compartments. Between the compartments are smoke barrier doors. When the doors are closed, they prevent smoke from moving into another compartment. If all doors are closed, the fire will be confined to a limited area, and patients will be safe in adjoining smoke compartments. Smoke barriers are crucial because smoke is so dangerous. Most people think the danger in a fire comes from flames, but it's the smoke, which can travel quickly to areas far from the fire, that kills most people.
With a fire comes toxic gas and smoke. Smoke is probably the most dangerous part of a fire.
It acts quickly, it will deprive you of oxygen, and it can kill you within minutes.
That's why response plans emphasize moving people out of smoky areas and preventing smoke from spreading.
We close doors during emergency procedures because we need to make sure that the fire and smoke does not penetrate through that door, and so when the patient's behind the door, they're safe.
As part of knowing your fire response plan, it's important to learn which doors in your work area are smoke barrier doors.
Smoke compartment doors are designed to segregate an area of the facility. That way, if fire starts at a particular wing in the hospital, the doors will close and trap the smoke in that wing, and it will not spread to the other areas of the facility.
Evacuating patients from one smoke compartment to another is called horizontal evacuation.
There's no question that the ability to be able to move patients horizontally within a system has a major impact on making healthcare facilities much safer today than they were many years ago.
There is no foolproof rule for determining whether or not to evacuate patients, but consider these basic guidelines. If the fire is small and can be quickly contained and extinguished, then evacuation of the smoke compartment may not be necessary. If a fire has not been extinguished but has been contained by closing a door, evacuation of the smoke compartment should be implemented.
Fire extinguishers should only be used on small, controllable fires. If the fire is not controllable, close the door and get away from it.
In general, evacuate patients who are closest to the fire first. Move them horizontally into another smoke compartment. Staff members in the adjacent smoke compartment should be ready to assist evacuated patients. Always use the fastest, most convenient means to evacuate the patient. Wheelchairs, gurneys, or stretchers are one alternative, but usually there aren't enough of them to evacuate everyone, and it will take valuable time to get more. Often, the fastest and best method is to use carrying or dragging techniques. This takes teamwork and practice. The number of patients that have to be evacuated and the number of staff available at the time may influence whether one person or two move each patient. If there are 2 staff members available, first remove the blankets or sheets covering the patient. Disconnect medical equipment that can't be moved with the patient. Untuck the corners and roll the sheet toward the patient.
Oh,
Bad timing.
charming. That's because I never actually watched it all the way through, so duh. Okay, so that's fine. So any questions as to these 2 videos that we saw? They're all self-explanatory, really. I mean, the one that was shown on the news clip, I'm surprised that they only had 1 backup generator, to be honest, or I'm sure now they have more backup generators because they really don't, NYU does not want to be on the news for that kind of thing. Considering it's supposed to be one of the best hospitals in the Northeast. So in that case, apart from the babies that got all the news clips, they had to move all the other patients. This is a high-rise building. You heard that they had to move the babies down 9 floors. So they had to walk them down. So in real life, the other patients, they'd have to move them. And you saw the sleds that they were using, which is what we looked at earlier. But otherwise, everybody had to move down at least 9 floors. As far as the fire evacuation goes, that is one thing that you have to practice, because you do not have time to look at a manual. If there's a real fire breaks out, you have no time to do anything except act. We had a fire marshal who was part of the security services in the hospital I worked in Canada. And he used to come around, and this was the fire drill. And he'd come around and he'd suddenly appear in this little, what it was a little stool and a red flashing light. And when you saw that red flashing light, that was the fire, and you had to act accordingly. So you had to go out and you had to pull the fire alarm. You had to get the fire extinguisher, and you had to code red such and such and such and such place it was. So you officially had to do that. And he'd appear, you'd be walking down the hallway, and suddenly you'd see this thing in the middle of the hallway, and there was nobody else around. He had put it there and was lurking usually around the corner.
That part of his job.
It was part of his job, unfortunately,
I bet
yes.
he enjoyed that part.
Well, except that occasionally, especially if you were really busy, you'd look at him and say,
sorry now.
I'm busy, I can't do this at the moment, I'm busy, and wander off, and that's not what you're supposed to do. Sorry, yeah. We had one nurse who used to regularly just go over and kick it over and say, oh, fire's out. So anyway, but in all seriousness, we did have fire drills that were a little bit better organized than that one. And you literally had to, the fire department would be informed. We were not informed because it was supposed to be a surprise, but the fire department was informed that we were going to do a drill. So you literally had to go and pull the fire alarm, and the fire alarm went straight to the fire department, as well as to the front, the operators, the hospital operators, and to security. And we'd have to react. We'd have to get patients out of the building. We'd have to sit them at the front of the hospital where we were supposed to meet. And that was fine in the middle of summer. But when they did one when it was 30 below, it was a little bit strange. So anyway, but you had to do it because fires don't appear in the summer only. You can get a fire in the middle of winter. In the middle of winter in Calgary, it could be 40 below.
It's all good and well until you give your patients a real heart attack.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most people are used to that. So you'd get, okay, we're having a fire drill. Get your parkas on and off we go, you know. The only thing we didn't do was interrupt treatment when it was a fire drill. We would continue with treatment. If it was a real fire, obviously you'd stop treatment and then get the patient out. But for a fire drill, that was the only thing that we didn't do, was we did not stop treatment. Everything else, everybody else would vanish. And you and your colleagues, whoever there was 2 or 3 of you, were left with the patient, and the rest of the building was evacuated. And the firemen would go coming in with their thing. What are you doing here? Well, we're still treating. Oh, okay, sorry. And off they go. But that was a rehearsal for them as well. The last thing that any firefighter wants to do is come and fight a fire in a hospital. Because, first of all, they're usually big. Hospitals tend to be built up now, not spread out. Can anybody tell me what height a fire department ladder can reach? Everybody knows that officially from the outside, you can't fight a fire over 7 floors. But what they have in the high rises is that they have fire stations at various floors above that level. So they can attach themselves, they can attach their hoses to these fire plugs that are on each.
Inside or outside?
Inside of the building. So they get up to whatever level they can reach with their fire hoses. And then from there above, they have connections inside the building that they can attach to, and then that's how they fight high-rise fires. But as far as from outside, you saw the Hartford fire. Nothing really has changed as far as the ladders go, except for the extension ladders can go up a little higher. But normally, above 7 floors, they have to go inside. That's why you see them hiking up the stairs. So that's the fire. So is there anything other than the fact that there's, as far as the hospital is concerned, as I said, most firefighters do not want to fight a fire in a hospital simply because they're big, there's lots of people, there's lots of sick people, you have to get them out. Anything else that would cause them to worry about fire in a hospital?
Well, there's like flammable, yeah, like oxygen and stuff.
Flammable stuff, yeah. So oxygen to start with. All of the nitrous oxide in the ORs. There's all the anesthetic gases. And not to mention any of the electrical panels, electrical systems, if they have dental areas in the hospital, then they have chemicals. The labs in the hospital have chemicals, all that lovely stuff. So it all amounts to what can explode. Some of the chemicals are good unless they're heated. What's going to heat them? It's massive great fire that's coming up from second floor and the labs are on the fourth floor. You wouldn't have patients perhaps up there, but you've got all these chemicals in the labs. The hematology lab, the chemistry lab, all sorts of labs that are there. Have I scared the hell out of you yet?
I've seen it all on Grey's Anatomy.
So yeah, I mean it's all great as far as the fire drills and everything like that, but for it to be a real fire or a real evacuation, there's not many of them around, but when they happen, they happen. I've only been involved in one, and it was a relatively small one. We only had to evacuate one wing, but it could have been a lot worse. And I happened to be in the wing that was not being evacuated, so that helped. But it can be very, very difficult sometimes. So let's finish up with a few little things about the active shooter. What I would like to do is, we're still continuing with emergencies not next week, because we hit this, next week is spring break, but the week after, it is spring break, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows it's spring break. Yeah, I'll send an email just to make sure nobody comes in. But what I'd like to do is go over a few bits and pieces about Alice, but I'm going to see if I can get a hold of our director of security and see if he can come in and give you a little talk about security and Alice as far as the college concerned. Would that help? Okay, I'll do that for next week. Week after.
Next week we're here.
Not next week, the week after. Or the week that we're back from spring break. How does that sound? And the other thing before we finish up is that midterm exams are on the 22nd. Oh, yes. And they will be done in class.
Are we gonna have a review?
Ladies, gentlemen. What?
Are we gonna have a review?
That's what we're gonna do next week apart from Alice. We're almost finished breast. So we'll do a little bit on lymphomas, but what I'd like to do is do a review as well. Okay? So if we had an active shooter on campus, we all know, everybody know what the buildings are called around the quadrangle. We're building A, which is this way around, this is the quadrangle. What's this building here? C. Who's in C?
Nurses.
Nursing, yeah. And administration. Administration has the bottom floor, and nurses have the rest. And B and C are actually nursing. What about D, which is on the other side of the quadrangle from us?
That's right, humanities.
Pardon? Anatomy and physiology, yeah. What else? Well, the library is over there.
Library and cosmetology.
Cosmetology, yeah. Cosmetology is over there, the library is over there. What about E building?
That's like, isn't that like right next to us? That's where
It
Subway.
actually goes around, so E building is where it starts roughly is the Student Services Building.
Subway.
And goes in Subway, of course, and goes around that way, so it's a sort of circular building. Okay, so that's mainly classrooms. I believe there's some, I think chemistry, physics, that area is around there. So if I said to you that, or the intercom opens up and says, we have an active shooter in D building, what do we do?
Evacuate.
Do we?
It seems
Okay.
pretty far away.
It's far away?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to evacuate at that point? Or do we want to wait and see how it goes?
Oh, I don't wanna wait. So.
I mean, if they're in that building, I think it's safe to
evacuate.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
leave
So
that
where
one.
do we evacuate to?
The opposite end.
Have that fire
This
exit
way.
door right there.
Yeah, but where do we go from there? You do not go to your car and get the heck out of here. You have to make sure that we have an area where we actually meet in case we get all separated. And the area that we meet is, everybody knows where parking lot 1 is, where the staff and faculty.
Yes.
And there's a grassy area behind building C. Everybody know that? That's where we congregate. This is why I'm saying building D, building C. Everybody's going to congregate around in C, but the active shooters are in D.
Yeah.
So you're actually going towards him or her. So
probably wait and see.
Yeah. So we're in A, so we're relatively safe. What they'll probably say is active shooter in D, evacuate D if possible, everybody else stays put. Because how long does it take the cops to get here?
5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah, 5 or 6 minutes. But we also have armed security here. So hopefully that's their first priority, is go look. Go hunt them down. Make sure what they're doing. But we'll ask the boss and find out. If they have armed security here, and we do, then what's their job in an active shooter? They don't, I'm presuming, this is only guesswork, I'm presuming that they don't wait for the cops. They go in and see if they can track them down. And the cops would be
Right behind.
right, well, hopefully right behind, depending on how many minutes you got, but they would be backup for the security guys. Now, it depends on how many armed security guys that they have. Because if you have an active shooter, you're not going to go in there with anything other than a weapon. You're not going to go in there unarmed. Right? That would be just an idiot-proof thing. So you wouldn't do that. She says hopefully. But that's what you should do. So everybody else should stay out. If, however, there is an intercom comes over and they say, we have an active shooter on level 3A building. Where are we?
2.
Level 2. What do we do? This time, we get out if we can. There's 2 doors there. There's 2 exits there. There's 2 exits at the end of the hall. This would be closer. And one would hope that he's going to stay upstairs until he's finished what he has to do. By that time, you can be in, down and out and away from the building. and you make sure all the doors are shut behind you, just so that it slows them down. If, however, they say that there's an active shooter in a building, second floor,
Pissed.
yeah,
Hide and fight.
hide and fight. If you, well, you see, where is he? You don't know.
We would hear this.
We don't know. Well, you would hear it if he's opening
If he's
fire.
yeah.
If he's looking for
Well, he's
somebody
not an active
to
shooter.
open fire on, you wouldn't necessarily hear him. If he hasn't started shooting, you have no idea where he is. If he has opened fire and he's on that side, then you get out this way. If he's on this way, you get out that way. And this is the beauty of this classroom, is you can go out either side. This is one of the few classrooms that you can do that. The EMS classroom is another one. You can go all the way through. These are one of the two classrooms that you can do that. Otherwise, the other ones, you have one door in and one door out. And you can't get over onto the other hallway. So if he's coming down this hallway firing, you go out that door. If he's coming down this hallway firing, you go out that door. And you get out as fast as humanly possible. Okay? So hopefully we will get some more information from our friends in security next time we're here. But you guys are here tomorrow with